Hi guys! So I thought that it would be a good time to do an in-depth walkthrough of how I'm using my Hobonichi Cousin, which is my work planner, since it's been a few months since I showed you what I've been doing with it. This is the 2017 spring edition, so I've been using it for about 6 months now. So first of all, as you can see, I use a mechanical pencil with this. This is a Parker Urban and I absolutely love it. It's very satisfying and chunky, and I decided to use a pencil because I wanted to be able to erase things easily, and I was tired of having lots of ink splatters, which I had last year, and I've really been enjoying it. So I just have some of my cards for work in here and a Sami flag and a Greenlandic flag, because I've been working on grammars of Sami and Greenlandic. A picture of Panda. This classic card which I got from a friend a few years ago that I always keep in my Cousin. And you can see here I had a tragic accident a few weeks ago. I accidentally tore 2 pages and I was really upset and got lots of support and helpful advice on Instagram, and I ended up just covering the pages with washi, and that worked out really well, and I actually quite like it now because there are no other decorations in this planner, so it adds a bit of colour. I don't use these for anything. Occasionally I have to consult a future date, and I think maybe once or twice I've had to look at a past date, but I leave them blank. Now we get to the first spread that I do use, which is the vertical yearly overview. So I used to use this as a bird's eye view of what I had going on for the year. So I would write in when I was at a conference, when I was teaching, things like that. And I felt like it was kind of redundant because I had basically all of the same information on my month on 2 page spread, which I'll show you in a minute. So this year I decided to experiment with something new, and instead to use this as an index for my daily pages, which I use for work notes. So you can see that I don't fill in every day. I only fill in the days where there's something that I think I'm going to need to refer back to. Because what happens in these monthly spreads, I'll just show you one here. So I make an index at the beginning of every month for the daily spreads so that I can find things, and often I put an asterisk next to the ones that I'm going to need to refer to again. So, for example, you see I think I'm going to need to look at those again, so I star it. But after you've been using the planner for a few months, it gets quite cumbersome having to check through all of the monthly indices. So instead I thought that it would make more sense just to have one single spread where I can go to, and everything that I'm going to need to refer to later in the year I can find very easily because I only have to look at 1 or at the most 2 pages. So we're on September now, so I've been using it for 6 months and it's been really handy. Because often it's so frustrating when I know that I've made a note about something somewhere in the daily pages, and you know, I have already like 6 months worth of pages to look through. This just makes it really simple. So I still use the top and the bottom to record what's going on. At the top I write down if there's some kind of big event that I have happening that month that's time-based or where I have to be somewhere. So for example, last month I was teaching a summer course, so I wrote that down, and then I had another meeting that I just to keep track of if I'm away, basically, if there's something big happening. And then at the bottom I write down the research projects that I need to be working on that month. So these are the things that are not really connected to anyone else, I'm just working on them myself, and I want to make sure to keep a focus on them. So then moving on to the next set of pages, we have the month on 2 pages, and I use this as a very, very basic overview, mostly just for purposes of planning when I'm going to be able to work on research projects. So I used to use this as a more detailed calendar, so I would write down appointment times when I was teaching, when I was out, when I was away. I would write down in not a huge amount of detail, but much more detail. So if I had a dentist appointment, for example, I would put it on here, and I would use this if I needed to make an appointment or check when I was free. And then towards the end of last year, I started to feel like that was kind of a burden because effectively I had to write everything down twice. I had to write it down here and then I had to write it down my weekly pages. And I noticed that I was actually going to the weekly pages more often and writing things down there, and then I would think, oh, I have to write it down the monthly pages as well. And I just wanted to streamline the system and cut out redundancies. And I felt like if I naturally gravitate towards the weekly pages, which is where the heart of the actual planning system is for me, then I really don't need to write it down here as well, because it just is doubling up the work. So I decided just to take a much more laid back, hands-off approach to this and just write down very, very basic information. So for example, if I'm in my department at university, I just write down department. So I know that that day I'm not going to get any research done. And if I know that I'm working on a particular project, so for example, this Greenlandic project is a book that I'm writing with a colleague, I've written down those days, so I know that's what that day is dedicated to. And then if I want to fit in something else or see how much time I'm going to be able to dedicate to a different project, I can look at this and see which days am I going to have free in the month. So that's all I'm using it for. And I think that that works better because there isn't so much doubling up. The only thing that I've noticed is that I still tend to forget about this. And this is an interesting thing to me because often on other planner videos, I hear people say, I can't live without a monthly spread. I really need the monthly spread. And to me, I think because for many years I never had a monthly spread, I only had a weekly or a daily. It's something that I've never felt was an absolute necessity in my planning system, so I've been really happy to have it since I've been using a Hobonichi. But I think somehow in my brain, it's still not my go-to place. It's like an extra, it's like a useful bonus. But I often forget to check it and just end up checking the weekly pages. So sometimes I have to remind myself, if I want to do some kind of project planning, like figuring out how many days I'm going to have available for something, use this because it's easier. You don't have to, you know, flip through so many pages. You can see the whole month at a glance, but it's still something that I have to remind myself. So sometimes I feel like this spread is a little bit neglected in comparison to the weeklies and the dailies, which I use all the time. The other thing I use this for is a placeholder for things that I know need to get done around a certain time, but I'm not sure exactly when I want to do them. So I just put them in here so that I know that they won't get lost. So for example, this is an event that was happening. I knew it was going to happen sometime in September, and at the time that I wrote this, I didn't know exactly when, so I just put it there so that I wouldn't forget that that was happening. And then when I got a more precise date, I put it in the weekly spread. Or this is something that has been a long-term goal to get done at work, and it's been bumped and bumped and bumped, so I put it on to remind myself to think about it again in September, and I think it's going to get bumped again because it's really not urgent. And there are so many things that are urgent that I can't deal with anything else at the moment, but that's what I use this for. So I think I'll bump this to a later month and then worry about it again then. I've also marked in holidays. There are a lot of Jewish holidays coming up at the end of the month and the beginning of next month, so I've put them in here as well so that I'll know that those are not days that I'm going to be able to get anything done in terms of work. And then I put in, this is the start of induction week for the new academic year. Our new students will be coming. So that's the kind of thing that I put in here, and it works quite well. I think the only issue with it, as I said, is that I feel like I sometimes don't use it as much as I could. But you can see for the months that are already completed that I do use it to map out basically when I'm going to have time to do these various research projects, which is what I want it for, so that's fine. And now we come to the weekly spreads. So the weekly spreads, like I said, are really the heart of the planner. So if we go to the current week, you can see this is quite a typical week. It's very messy and full of all kinds of stuff. So I use this for appointments and to-dos. And so what I do, first of all, is as soon as an appointment comes up, I put it in here straight away. So like I said, this is the only place where I put my specific individual appointments or teaching or anything else that's timed. I just put it in here, and this is what I check for that. So like I said, I've stopped using the monthly spread for that. And I really like just having that in one place because, it means I only have to look in the weekly spread and everything is there and only there. So on this left-hand column, which is just a blank column for notes, this is what it would look like in a blank spread. I put things here that I would like to get done sometime during the week, and I'm not sure when. So usually I'll write these in quite a bit beforehand. So maybe the previous week or even a few weeks earlier, if I know that I want to get something done in a particular week and I can't face working out exactly when, I'll just put it here, and it's the same principle as this list in the monthly spread. The things that I put up here, I just know that it won't get forgotten about. I don't have to worry about it again, and then when the week comes it will remind me, and then I can slot it into a particular day. So I really like that system because it's a way of telling my brain not to worry about things until it's the right time, and I don't have to decide more specifically what exactly I want, how I want to do them. And then when the week comes, I have quite a few things on this list here. I'll just start putting them, slotting them into different days and then crossing them off of here, and then I know that they're more taken care of. And then if I have to bump them, that's okay, because I'll bump them from the day that they've been listed. But I don't have to worry about the stuff over here anymore. So my goal is to try to cross the stuff off here as soon as I can in the week so that I don't have to keep thinking about it. This stuff, when I actually get to the week, these things often make me feel nervous because if they're unassigned to a particular day, I start to feel like, and then I have to do these things as well, and I don't know when I'll do them, so I like to slot them into particular days as soon as I can. Sometimes I also write notes here if there's some information that I've been given that I need to check out further or something. I'll just write it here, or occasionally an email address or something, just because often if I have this open to the weekly page, that's the easiest place to put things. I do have a detailed 2-page spread in the back of the Techo just for email addresses and phone numbers. And the main reason that I started to do that actually is so that when I make these videos, I don't have to worry about covering things up with sticky notes if there's sensitive information. So for a couple of years, I would have to go through and cover everything up with sticky notes that, had a student's name or an email address. And I finally decided I can't deal with that. So instead I'll just make sure that I only write initials or first names on here, and I don't put phone numbers and email addresses. So that was why I started having the list at the back. But actually I discovered that it was quite handy as well to have all of the phone numbers and email addresses at the back, because say I write down an email address and then months later I need it again, and I search in Outlook and it doesn't come up, which happens sometimes. I can just go to the back of the book and find it straight away, and I don't have to look through all the weekly pages and try to remember when it was that I first wrote it down. So it's actually quite handy. So that's this column. And then on the daily columns, at the top, I usually leave these blank, but I will write something in if there's something that's going on over a longer period, so more than one day, that I just want to keep a note of. So for example, our departmental manager was away last week and the first half of this week, and so I just wrote a note that at the top of the page that she was away, so that I would remember that. Then with the checkboxes, I usually write in the checkboxes the thing that I want to be the focus of the day, or the main thing that I need to remember for that day. So if it's a day when I'm at home, I write the research project that I want to be doing that day and how much I want to get done of it. And if I'm in the department, then I usually won't write anything, because then I can see from the appointments what I'll be doing. Or if it's something else. So this was a particular event that I had to go to, and I wrote it at the top so that I would know that that's what I would be doing that day, and I wouldn't try to plan other things. And I wrote that in before I got the exact timetable. Then when I got the exact timetable, I put it down here in the hourly layout, but I left it up at the top because it's an easy way to see what I'll be doing that day. So that I usually try to reserve that for the daily overview, and then not to write any to-dos here, because otherwise it gets confusing. So I put to-dos at the bottom in the blank spots here after midnight, after the hourly spread ends. The only other thing that I put up here is if James is in the market, so if he's working basically, so that I'll know if I'm at home, I'll know that that means that I will be in charge of taking our dogs out, because that affects how the day is scheduled, because they're quite demanding. And if I am going to be out and he's working, then I need to know so that I can book the dog sitter. So those are the only things that I put at the top, and that's been working quite well. Last year I was a bit inconsistent and I would write a mix of to-dos and the daily focus, and it got kind of messy. So I much prefer having them split so that I know that the top is only like big overview things and the bottom is individual to-dos. So what happens often with these individual to-dos is that sometimes I can run out of space. If I run out of space here, that's a sign that I should switch over to a daily. So what I do with the dailies is, and I'll show you in a minute, the dailies are a mix of work-related notes, project notes, ideas, brainstorming, notes from meetings, all of that kind of stuff, and daily pages. So I'll show you how I use them in a minute, but basically I just use these spaces for notes here until they run out, and then I transfer them over to a daily if there's too much. I try to keep this just for timed events, just for the schedule and not for to-dos, but sometimes it can be convenient to list to-dos in the time when I'm planning to be able to do them. So for example, yesterday I went into my department and met with my departmental manager. We had a whole list of things to go through, and so I started writing them down here because I thought I'll just put them here because that's when I'm going to be meeting with her. Then at the end it ended up getting too unwieldy and I had too many things and it was starting to affect other parts of the day, and so that was when I realized that I should really have transferred them over to a daily. So that's how that works. I generally try to keep this free for timed events so that I can see the timed events and have enough room to write them without having to-dos get in the way, but sometimes I kind of end up straying away from that ideal pattern. And I also sometimes use the early morning hours because I don't get up early, so I'll sometimes put to-dos there just because it's blank space, and you know, I'm guaranteed not to need like the 6 and 7 and 8 a.m. slots. So sometimes I'll do the same with the late evening as well. So like for example here I wrote something, this is for tomorrow, and I wrote something in like, you know, the sort of between 11 and midnight because I knew that I wasn't going to have any timed events then. Incidentally, when the 2018 Cousin comes out, and I won't be getting mine until spring because I've got the spring edition, so I buy it every year in February and start using it at the end of March. They've switched this to a 24-hour timetable, so the timetable goes down to the end of the page and there isn't this blank space for notes anymore. I'm planning as it is now, I'll see how it is when I actually start using it, but I think I'm going to use it in the same way as before and just not worry about those late night hours because I'm not going to have appointments at 3 in the morning, so I can just keep using this for notes as I've been doing now. So it's not going to bother me that there will be times written down here. I think I'll just keep using it the same way because this works really well for me and it's never been an issue. Well, I take that back. It's very rare that I have a timed event in the middle of the night, but it does occasionally happen. For example, the 2018 Hobonichi launch was at 3 a.m. UK time last week, and I actually, really, it would have been very useful if I'd had a time to note that down in my planner, which I didn't, because I ended up staying up all night like a complete idiot. Because it took me like 5 hours to get my order through, and I had to go into university the next day and I was out all day. And so what I will do in the future on the Hobonichi launch night is make sure that I am staying at home the next day so that I can sleep late if I end up staying up all night again. So fortunately next year I'll be able to circle 3 a.m. Hobonichi launch and avoid that kind of thing because it was not pleasant, I can tell you. So I think I'm actually looking forward to having the times down here for the middle of the night, although I think 90 or 95% of the time I won't actually need to use them and I'll just keep using them for notes. So basically that's it. If I have a timed event, I circle it, I circle when it starts, and if it's something that I know how long it's going on for, then I'll block it out. Let me show you. So you can see this here. I knew that this was starting at 10:15 and continuing until 4. So thanks to the grid on the Hobonichi paper, which I love, it makes it really easy to draw a nice straight line here so that I can show you it's starting at this time, running down until this time. And then if there are other things that I need to put in during that time, I just put them in that empty space, but this shows me at a glance that the event is lasting that long. I also use the same kind of system for blocking out times for working at home. If I'm working on a research project, and I want to be able to estimate how long I think it should take me or how much I think I'll be able to get done in a day, I do the same thing. So I'll block off the times. I don't circle the start time then because it's not an appointment, but I just block off, I think this should take me 2 hours, I think this should take me an hour and a half. And so I find this timetable really, really useful, and that's one reason that I could never give up the Cousin as my work planner, because I'm so dependent on having this timetable. I briefly considered, or maybe more than briefly, switching to a week's mega when the week's megas were announced, because I thought it would be so light and so portable, it would be really tempting not to have to carry an A5 planner around with me everywhere. But I just wouldn't be able to function without this hourly layout. So if it's an appointment that I don't know how long it's going to last, I just circle the beginning time, and then I, kind of don't designate a particular end time. So that's how these hourly spreads work. I will also put in information about, for example, if it's a meeting, where it is, or if there are any contact details, or if there's anything that I need to remember to tell people in the meeting, then I'll put it in the space for the meeting. So that's why this ends up getting quite full. If there's spillover, if it's too much information to put in the actual slot and it would start running into another slot that I want to keep free, then I just put an asterisk next to it and then write the information down here. So you might be able to see here, it says print and post, and then there's an asterisk, and then it has some more information down at the bottom. So that's how the weekly spreads work, and I'm really, really happy with this. This is the third year that I've been using the Cousin, and I've been using it pretty much in the same way. So it's kind of evolved a bit. I've tweaked it, but it's more or less been constant, and this is just perfect for me as a work planner. If I have something that is like I particularly need to remember that I'm afraid that I won't remember, then I use one of these arrows that I got from Paper Chase ages ago, just because that is a really strong sign that I generally don't forget it if it has a big giant arrow next to it. So for example, I'm selling my bike and my bike is in my office, so I have to remember to put the key to my bike lock in my bag because the keys are at home at the moment. So everything like that goes in here. And this is what next week looks like. So you can see it's quite empty at the moment. These are things that are happening on Monday. So that's already relatively full in terms of like timed things. This is going to last all day, but I hadn't marked out an end time because I don't know exactly when it's ending. This thing that's starting at 1. And then the rest of the week, at the moment, it's not that full, partly because these days I'm working on the Greenlandic project all day with my colleagues. So that's basically, I won't have any other appointments in that day, or I'll try to avoid other appointments because we just want to work on this one thing. And this day I'm going to be at home and I'm going to be working on another research project, so I'll end up probably mapping out the structure of that day on the day, but I don't need to do it beforehand. So that's what the weekly spreads look like. When I start teaching again a few weeks from now, I will mark out, let's see, I'll mark out the teaching schedule so you can see there. That's what my teaching schedule looks like. It's quite empty other than that, but it will fill up with lots of other things. And so that's the weekly spreads. Now, the daily spreads, as I mentioned, I use this for a mix of different things. So I have to be careful here because there are some names in this. So what I do, as I mentioned, is I use the dashboard of every month that says remember this. I use this as an index or a table of contents. So at the beginning of the month, I write down all the days of the month, and then I fill them in as I use them. So I'll just give a title to it, what that page is about. And so generally I use a separate page for each topic. So for example, the first page was a list of contributors to a volume that I'm editing. The second page is some reference information. The third page is a list of contributors to a different volume that I'm editing, etc., etc. So often I'll get a page that doesn't have a huge amount of information on it, and that's okay with me because it works better for me. It's easier to find the information again if I have one topic per page. Sometimes I'll fill up the page and sometimes I'll use more than one page for a topic, but then I know that they're together. So that's generally how I use it. It's just like lists of things that I need to remember and I need to be able to check. Sometimes it's just random notes that I won't have to come back to. And then sometimes, as I mentioned, if a day is particularly busy and I run out of space in the weekly, if I start feeling that the weekly is crowded, then I'll move to a daily. And then I copy all of the to-dos over from the weekly. And as you can see, you can't fit a ton of to-dos on here, so it doesn't take me very long to copy them over. I'll leave the appointments here, and I'll just use this for checking the appointments and the timed events. And I'll copy all of the to-dos over onto a daily, the daily for that day. And then I'll just consult that daily for the rest of the day. And that's a huge relief because then I feel like I have as much space as I need for all of the different to-dos. So the trick to making that work, if you have your dailies consist of a mix of all kinds of different things, including long-term reference information, brainstorming, project ideas, etc., and daily notes, the trick to making that work is that I have to make sure that I never use up the current day or go into the future. So what that means is that there are some days when I'm more likely to have to use the day for daily notes than others. Those are generally days when I go into the university, because that's when lots of little to-dos pile up, like things that I have to talk to about people that I have to email. I'll see somebody and they'll say, can you send me that? And then I have to write it down to remember to do it later. That kind of stuff generally happens when I'm out, as opposed to when I'm at home working on a particular research project. So I just have to make sure that, like, say today is the 9th of September, I have to make sure that I haven't filled up the 9th of September with other things, because then I won't be able to use it when the day comes if I need it for a daily notes page, if that makes sense. So generally that works fine. Generally I can kind of manage it, because what normally happens is there will be, like, say there's a weekend or there are a few days when I'm at home, then I'll fall behind and I'll have a few blank pages spare. And then if I get to, like, say the following Wednesday and it's a really busy day and I need the daily spread for daily notes, then I'll just flip to that day, leaving the blank pages behind, use the correct date for the daily notes, and then I can go back and I have a whole bunch of spare blank pages that I can use for other notes. But I keep the correct date free so that if I need it, I can always use it. Occasionally I slip up. So for example, the day before yesterday I was at this all-day event and I needed to take a lot of notes for that, and I'd already been using up all of the notes quite consistently earlier in the month. So I thought, like, well, tomorrow is probably fine, I won't need a daily page for that. And so I've started writing on the Friday page, and it was Thursday. Then Friday came, and this was the page that you saw when I had to go into the department and discuss all of this stuff with my departmental manager, and it got really crowded, and I wished that I had the daily page, but I didn't, because I'd already used it the day before for writing notes on. So I'm not supposed to do that. So generally I try to avoid doing that, and usually it's fine. So I hope that that makes sense. I think that might be kind of confusing, but just to give you an example. So if I'm using a given daily page for notes, then I just ignore the date. It doesn't matter if I'm writing it on the exact date. I tried to start implementing a system where if I wasn't using the correct date, like say I was writing this and it was actually the 21st, then I would write the date here so that I could see later if I needed to go back, well, how far in advance, when was I actually writing this? But often I forget to do it, and it doesn't really matter that much because I know that it's sometime in the same month, probably within a few days, so it's not a huge disaster. So for example, these were some notes for the introduction to one of the volumes that I'm editing, and I think I was on the underground and I had the idea, for a bit of structure, and so I just wrote it down here and left the rest of the page blank, because it could be that when I go to write this introduction, I'll start thinking more about it and then I'll write some more detailed notes here. So I'm happy to have the rest of the page blank because I might use it for the same topic later. I try to, like I said, reserve a single page for a single topic, so I'd rather not then start making notes about something else on the same page in case I want to use it later. It's much more convenient having the whole page dedicated to a single topic. It could be that I won't make any more notes about this and I'll leave the rest of this blank, and that's okay with me as well. So there, like I said, some of the daily pages are completely full. Others, you know, I haven't used up the whole page, and that's all right with me, because the main thing is that as long as I can keep it so that I have enough space, which I do, this system works fine, and I can find things later, that's all that I care about. So I don't mind if I don't use up the whole page every day. So for example, this one was another one, edits to a video of a play that my students and I put on. So when I was editing the video, there were some notes for things to change and fix, and I just used this page for those notes. And this is the sort of thing that I'm not going to need to go back and check again later, because the editing is done. I don't need this anymore. But I have it on its own separate page, so I can see this page is taken up by the play edits, and that's that. And I wouldn't have wanted to put this on this page, even though there was blank space, because it's easier if I just have one topic per page, like I said. So as long as I make sure that I stay a little bit behind and that the current date is empty so that if I need to, I can use it for daily notes, then the system works fine. And what I do is I'll generally, if I have some extra pages at the end of a month, like sometimes, let's say the last few days of the month I'm at home working on something, I don't need to write notes. So I have like 4 or 5 extra pages. When the new month starts, I'll just leave those pages blank and then move on to the new month and start over again, so that I don't get further and further behind as the year goes by. The first year that I was using the Cousin, I just used, you know, every page one after the other. I didn't use it for daily notes then, I was just using it for project notes and things like that, and I ended up with a chunk of blank pages at the end, and so I decided I didn't want to do it like that anymore. I wanted to keep within the month, and that also makes it easier to find things, because say I wrote something down at one point and I had a feeling that the thing happened sometime in November, then I can go back to the November pages and check, and it will be there, because I generally don't mix the months up. So it could be that I'll have a month with a few extra pages. Generally, I actually use up all the pages every month. Sometimes I have a few pages left over at the end of the month, and that's fine, because what happens sometimes is later I just need a blank page for something that's not particularly time sensitive, just like for random notes or, you know, figuring something out, just a blank page, and then I can go back, and if I have a blank page from an earlier month, I can use that. So last year and so far this year, these first 6 months of the year, I've pretty much used up all the pages up until the present moment. So I think like the system seems to be ideal for what I need it for. So, and I really like it. So that's how I use the daily pages. Then at the end I have some information that is sensitive, so names of incoming students and phone numbers and addresses like I mentioned, and that just makes it easy, because then I can just remember not to flip to the end of the book and I'll be okay. And at the back I just keep this booklet this actually comes from a Leuchtturm. This is the Leuchtturm address book, and I keep this in here. It has passwords, work-related passwords in it. And these are just some notes that I got from a finance meeting at work, and I'm keeping them in here for now, and then I just keep some sticky notes and my extra arrows. And that's it. So that is how I'm using my Cousin at the moment. Let me know if you have any questions about it that I didn't cover in here, or if anything was unclear. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!